of rubber, if you will, turned in on itself, and inside was liquid, and it was kind of had flashy things in it. But the point is, if you would try to grab it, it would slip out of your hand. It would jump out of your hand, basically. You try to push it, and it would whoop, and you would whoop, and that was kind of a fun thing, right? Whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay. Well, that's how Scripture is for me sometimes. That's the way Scripture is for me. Because about the time I think I have God, and I can put my arm on my hand and say, whoop, I know what to do with this. This is how you do it. I squeeze it too hard and out it comes. Right? That's what is going on for me today in the Scriptures. Let me tell you. Today's gospel is about reconciliation. All about reconciliation. How to heal when relationships get damaged, when they get fractured. How are relationships restored? How to fight fair. It's so critical, particularly in a marriage, but in other relationships, how to fight fair, right? How to have healthy and transformative disagreements, and not fights that break up churches and cause schisms and destroy people and communities. I mean, that's what's going on in Matthew's community. It's been going on for 2,000 years, right? They're having fights. And what Matthew is saying is, the Lord said, what you loose on earth, I will loose in heaven, and what you bind on earth, I will bind in heaven. Have we heard that recently? Where? Jesus told that to Peter, right? And now we hear it for the church. So what we're hearing is the church now has the authority to say who's in and out of the community. And that's important for the community because they've come together and they're getting together and they're not getting along every day. And so Matthew has to describe a process by which people come together in conflict. Matthew's approach is this. First thing you do, one-on-one. Right? So Paul and I are in conflict. I go and meet with Paul, and I say, here's what happened from my perspective, here's what you have to say, and we get it, and we figure it out. Now, of course, that won't, if you know Paul, you know that won't fix it. I'm kidding, Paul. If you know me, you would know that wouldn't fix it. I'm just teasing, you know. So, Matthew says, well, then go get 2 more people. And they'll be your witnesses. Get together. So it's kind of one-on-one, then 3-on-1. Now we gang up on poor me, or poor Paul, right? And if that doesn't work, what do you do? The whole church. Can you imagine that day? You're home, alone. The doorbell rings. Ding dong. What? Yes? Well, we're here for the church and we're here to talk to you. Do you have a look? Now, this gets played out. And I have seen churches, not Episcopal churches typically. Typically it's not an Episcopal church. But I have seen it done, this formula followed. And it can be quite damaging. It can be misused, and people are deeply damaged. And in fact, kicked out of the church. There is a process, even in the Episcopal church, where one could be, communion could be withheld. Really, if we were in such deep conflict. I would never do that. Not in a million years. I would cut off my own arm before I would keep communion from you. You know that. But that's what this text says, basically. The church can come together and decide who's in and who's out. Okay. 12-step work. And you cannot hardly be an adult today in America and not know something about 12 steps. Right? Almost everybody has had some kind of addiction or some kind of a 12-step group in their life. In the 12 steps, the first few are about, I've wrecked it. I really messed it up. I can't do it anymore. Submission, right? The next few are about, well, maybe there's a God after all. Okay, I'll at least just open my mind to the possibility, maybe there's a God. And then it's sort of submission to that God. Okay? But then come steps 8, 9, and 10. You want to hear them? Here they are. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. All the people you have ever harmed and became willing to make amends or say, I'm sorry. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Face to face. Right? 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Every day, looking at yourself saying, what did I do wrong? Why does my gut hurt? Who did I offend today? And who do I have to say I'm sorry to? I like the 12-step approach. I like Matthew's approach. But at the end, it gets a little troublesome for me. I like the idea of taking my own life and looking at it and saying, who have I harmed, right? There's nothing more powerful than 2 or 3 years later getting a phone call from someone and having them say, you know what? I'm sorry. I hurt you. If I hurt you, I am so sorry because I was not dealing from a place of truth and honesty and integrity. And I want you to forgive them. Now, you can either forgive them or not. That's up to you. But what they say is clean your own side of the street. Right? That's all you need to do. Both approaches require what? That you have to talk to each other. Both approaches say you've got to talk to each other. Now, one more segue, okay? One more story. I was at a preaching conference a couple of years ago down in Nashville, and there was a comedian speaking to the group, and she was a southern woman, and she said, you know, in the South, she says, we have a way of dealing with people. She said, you can say anything you want about somebody, anything you want, as long as at the end of the sentence you say, bless their heart. Right? So it might be, my friend is such a slob. Living with her is like being with a P-I-G pig. Bless her heart. Right? Now, up north, we're not so subtle. We do the same thing, but we do it more subtle. We use the but sentence. Right? The but. We all do it, I know. I particularly use this a lot. Right? Our former pastor was a nice enough person, but she couldn't preach a lick. Right? I love my brother. I really do. I love him like crazy, but he drives me crazy. Right? Do you use this? This is what I'm saying. We spend so much time talking about the other person when we're mad that we spend precious little time talking to them, and the only thing that's ever going to fix it is when we talk to them. Talking about them is not going to do a doggone thing, is it? Except what? Make it worse, right? If we use the bless their heart sentence or the but sentence, it's only going to get worse until we face them and say, I am sorry. No relationship ever got restored. No healing ever took place. No conflict ever became transformative and healthy by talking about someone. Nothing happens at all unless and until you talk to them. Look, we are all flawed. Can we admit that? We are all flawed. I love you. I'm crazy about you. And I know you love me right back, right? But the day I leave, the week after I leave, somebody's going to say, well, that Mark, he was a silver-tongued devil, and he had silver hair, but he was stubborn. Right? What Matthew is saying is we have got to find a way to live with each other's flaws, right? And get through conflict, because all churches are going to have conflict. And we must find ways to make that conflict transformative, because communities can become stronger and more wonderful having gone through conflict. And this congregation has done it in the past. You guys have done it wonderfully, I know, because I've heard about it. Right? You have a lot to teach other churches about it. Okay, but here's my end. Here's the point. What about that toxic person? What about the person, let's say it's me. Paul and I are getting conflict, and Paul has come in and he's apologized to me, but I refuse to budge. I'm not going to move an inch off my position. Right? And not only that, I'm going to go talk about Paul to you and you and you. Right? Our community is being pulled apart by my stubbornness. I am the toxic person. What do you do about me? Right? Well, like I said, in 12-step work, you would just say, well, I've cleaned my own side of the street. It's all I can do. Matthew has a different approach. Matthew says what? Matthew 18:17. If a member refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile or a tax collector. If that person refuses to listen to you, make them an outcast as a Gentile or a tax collector. And that settles it. They're out. And the church has the authority, remember? Whatever they lose their mind, they're out. They're out because they're like a Gentile or a tax collector, and that settles it. Until you remember who Jesus spent his time with. Oops.